Hello, hello, welcome. How are y'all doing tonight? All right, how many of you, is this your first time at this meetup? Man, awesome. Welcome. So to give you a little bit of background on what we do here, my name is Stephen Phillips. I am with Dell Software. We've been doing this since September. We get together about once a month, sometimes twice a month. Ryan, don't count me on that. I know you're counting, you're doing the math, you're sitting there going, I think you missed a month, Stephen. And that's right, I did, Ryan. Anyways, as you can tell, I've known Ryan since we started this. He was one of the first people that showed up at our first meetup, and he's going to be doing the presentation about big data and ethical insights, which I think you'll find very interesting. The main thing I want to touch upon, can everybody hear me okay? Is there a lot of static? All right. So, hey, Brittany, do you want to say a few words about the Dell Center for Entrepreneurs? Okay, so first, let me introduce Brittany. As you walk up, I'll introduce you. This is Brittany Behrens. She is with Dell as well. She is with the Dell Center for Entrepreneurs. They focus on, funding and accelerating and helping companies, entrepreneurs, and startups alike. It's funded by and associated with Michael Dell. Is that correct? And Dell itself. All right, and so she's going to say a few words because the reason why we're here at this cool location is because I happened to meet Brittany and she's like, hey, will you do a few series up here? So here you go, Brittany.
Yeah, of course. So thank you all so much for coming. Like Stephen said, I am with Dell Center for Entrepreneurs, and we are Dell's entrepreneur initiative group. We work hand in hand with Dell Ventures, but our own kind of entrepreneurial hub. And we have a U.S. presence, and as part of that, we sponsor and work with organizations like Capital Factory all across the country, as well as sponsor startup conferences, offer technology consultation to startups, obviously, but then also having had the program for 3 years, we have a large network of VCs, angel investors, and then our Dell Ventures arm that can help entrepreneurs access capital. We actually launched our learning series today here at Capital Factory on selling into large enterprise. So if y'all want to check that out, it's on the Capital Factory video site right now. And for our next meetup on August 20th, we will be here at Capital Factory live streaming with our learning series on big data. So hopefully y'all will come for that. So thanks again for coming. If you have any questions and want to learn more about our program, I know that was a really quick overview, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer any of your questions. Thank y'all.
Awesome, thank you, Brittany. Now everybody take out your credit cards. I'm just kidding, folks. All right, so for those of you that are new to this, which most of you are, this is how we typically do this. I'll give you a little 3-minute Amway pitch why Dell cares about this space. Right, but then the main focus of this is bringing people up that are doing analytics, that are dealing with big data, and hearing what they're doing. The most important part of this entire evening, I cannot reiterate this enough, is you guys. So this isn't Ryan giving a presentation for an hour and all of us leaving home full on pizza. Right? My goal is that there's some interaction, because that's how we're going to learn, is from each other. So let's back up and first say, why does Dell even care about this space? How many people, raise your hands if you knew Dell had a software group? Ryan, you can't raise your hand. Some of you who've been here before, you can't. Right, so most of you are correct. So over the last 5 to 7 years, Dell has purchased a lot of IP in the software space and organized its business unit into these 4 areas. The only one that cares, and the reason why I say that is because I represent that group, and that's what we're here tonight for, is the information management group. That's the group that focuses on database management tools, analytic tools, data integration tools, predictive analytic tools. This is the big ooh-ah chart. So on the count of 1, I need an ooh. 1. And on the count of 3, I need an ah. 1, 2, 3. That's right. This chart's supposed to make you realize things are going on in the big data space, but the reason why you're here today is because you already know this is happening. The most important part is not the data itself, but how do you get insights out of it? All this data is being created, different types, different formats, different areas, cloud, on-premise, traditional sources, non-traditional sources. And the number one goal is how do I maximize and figure out a way to get better insights and either make more money, cut costs, or become more productive. But it's real simple, right? All you got to do is pick one vendor and call, and your entire big data challenge is solved. No, that's not the case. That's because big data is this very broad or ambiguous, thank you, term that reflects different parts of wherever people are in their analytic journey and what they're trying to accomplish. I don't even know what that chart's supposed to mean. What we think from a Dell software perspective is big data can really be broken down into 3 areas. How you manage data, whether it's through productivity tools, or whether it's through other overlays that help you interact with the data better, how you integrate data, so you bring data from different disparate sources using different tools, and how you analyze. So how do you take what you've just built that foundation on and bring it together in a way that you can make smarter decisions about? Again, one vendor, one tool chain, one rhythm nation, one heartbeat, that sort of thing, right? This is our portfolio. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. The main thing we're here for tonight is let's listen to what Ryan talks about. More importantly, listen, ask questions. I've got a mic in my pocket. I will come by so everybody can hear your question. And let's really make this interactive. At the end, we'll have a few announcements. One was Brittany stole my thunder about the August 20th one, which should be a very really interesting meetup because it's going to be a little bit different of a format, and we're going to record it. So I'm going to ask all of y'all to wear pants. I'm just kidding. We're not going to ask. We just want you to show up, and we're going to have a very interactive session. Come on, folks. Let's laugh a little. It's in the evening. Next time, I promise I'll provide alcohol. All right, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan. So Ryan was one of the very first people, probably within the top 5 people of our first meetup group. Bob, yourself, I think you were at the first one as well. September 17th, we all remember it. We have tattoos. Remember, we did that. We got tattoos that one night. Yes, we did. No, I'm just kidding. We don't have tattoos like that. My wife would kill me. Anyways, Ryan has helped me out multiple times in different areas. He's done big data roundups for me. You want to cue your presentation up, Ryan?
Sure.
You thought I was about to hand it over to you right then.
Yeah.
I was trying to buy you some time so you could get your presentation.
Pay no attention.
Pay no attention to the man behind the monitor, right? Anyways, so I've gotten to know Ryan, talked to him a little bit, and if you think about the Department of Public Safety in the state of Texas, they have access to a lot of data, right? But I would also, and I would say this to Ryan's face, even if he turned around, I'd say it to his back, that probably any state agency is a little bit antiquated and probably has a lot of legacy systems they're dealing with, and probably a lot of bureaucratic stuff, right? So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan O'Connor. He is a BI manager at the Texas Department of Public Safety. We're going to talk about, hey, that's a nice title. We're going to turn this over to you right now, Ryan.
Thanks, Steve. So I am Ryan. I work with the Texas Department of Public Safety, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing with data. A lot of people think, gosh, you've got a lot of big data and you use it for nefarious purposes. What I'm going to talk about is kind of the different parts of DPS and kind of my experience with this particular state agency and other state agencies. And when we talked about this particular meetup, we wanted to talk about how we use data to make decisions. And so it's important to kind of talk about how organizations make decisions in general. Of course, being a state agency, politics do come into play. We have a governor, we have a legislature, and they get voted into office and have the ability to make decisions that affect how the executive branch works. We also have processes and, of course, data. Where I come in as the business intelligence guy is how we use data to help improve decision making. So how do we make it more fair? How does data help make better and ethical decisions? So kind of a technical way of how do we make those kinds of decisions? What decisions do we need to make? What kind of questions are we asking? So as a state agency, we want to know how well are we fulfilling our mission? In DPS, I'll talk about it, it's to protect and serve. And the way we do that is broken down in a couple different ways that I'll describe in a little bit. So of course we want to be effective. The big thing in most government agencies is really keen on being efficient. How do we use our tax dollars? How do we use the people we hire to get that effectiveness? And then how do we position ourselves as an agency to make the public position better off? You know, how do we make the public better off because of the work we do? So in Texas, there is a process by which we decide what is important. On the right-hand side, you see we have a big strategic planning session. Every 2 years, we create a 5-year plan. And all 130-ish state agencies across the state of Texas use this method. And on the right-hand side is kind of hopes and dreams. So that's where the people that get elected talk about the great things that state government does. So we talk about the big mission, we do an external and internal assessments, what's going on in the world around us, and how well are we positioned internally to do that. So we go from kind of the hopes and dreams on the right, and then the legislature says, well, these are the ways and means by which you can do those things. So they give us money, and they allocate resources in terms of people. And in the middle, where we kind of start using data, is performance measures. So we have outcomes, which is what I'm going to focus on specifically, how we use data to achieve the outcomes of the driver license division within DPS strives to achieve.
Hey, Ryan, I warned you I was going to ask questions as we go through because I want people to ask questions. I know I was a little bit past my mark where I told you I was going to ask a question. So can you back up and tell me, how does DPS fit within the state legislature organization? Who's the head of that? Who do they report to? And how does that compare to other state entities? Sure. Just so everybody has a level set.
So the Department of Public Safety is one of 130 state agencies, of which are part of the executive branch that report to the governor. And in between the director of the Department of Public Safety, Steve McCraw, you may have seen him in the news recently, standing behind the governor, we start talking about the border stuff. They have a public safety commission that gets appointed, and they help guide the department. On the right-hand side, the folks that have the money and the ways and means kind of folks in the legislature is a board called the Legislative Budget Board. And they're the folks that make sure that this strategic plan makes sense, that we can account for how dollars make their way to achieving our ends. So it's kind of, they do the audits, those kinds of things. And they also make sure that, that our strategies are aligned with the state's priorities. Does that kind of answer your question, Steve?
Great answer, Ryan.
Thanks, Steve. We did over the phone with Skype. Does anyone else have any questions about this? This is kind of a busy slide, but I don't know how many people are aware of how kind of state government works. People within state government don't always know how this works. So I get to spend a lot of my time trying to explain this to some of our executives. So when they're trying to set budgets or set priorities for how we spend our time and energy, I get to talk about performance measures. So here's kind of, yes, sir.
I don't see schedule time, doing things on time. Is that?
Can you repeat that?
I don't see doing things on time. Is that too low level consideration? Is it sort of inefficiency?
It is a little low level. So what the legislature asks us, or the governor's office on the left-hand side and the legislative budget board, they talk about what needs to happen and how much of it needs to happen, but they don't say how it has to happen. So the agency creates what are called action plans, and really those are kind of the operational plans of how we execute whatever it is we're trying to do.
So they don't hand down, have to do this by a date. I responded to bids that had dates.
Oh, sure.
Maybe that was resolved by the commission or whatever.
Yeah, so
legislatures.
So the question was, I guess you've responded to some bids from state agencies. That's a level below that in terms of detail. So this will say every 2 years, this is what we're trying to achieve. Here's the money you have to do it. How you spend it is really up to you, but we're going to make sure it tracks to the outcomes we've agreed to here.
So now, are you talking about bidding on contracts?
Actually, there's two there are two contexts. One was we were going to look at the PUC, and basically it had a winter piece because you wanted to see what the patterns, energy saving patterns were then, and the summer, and certain times when you were to report back, which I always, to the executive board, which I always thought was therefore having to be a report back to the legislature. So that's one situation. Another situation in a group that's heavily state, trying to think if they're actually, anyway, but they are sunsetted, and they were sunsetted in like 3 years or 4, whatever it works. And I would have to think that, and this was their first, they just got stood up 3 years ago, whatever it was. So I would think there had to be time somehow up there.
Yeah, well, so basically these are just performance measures that get reported, but it all starts every 2 years. The governor says, guys, this is kind of the big picture for all of my state agencies, and here's what we're trying to achieve. And then down at the agency level, there's a particular mission for each agency. And in order to meet that mission, there's specific goals. DPS has 5 of them, 4 of them are public facing, and each one of those is supported by objectives. And that's where you get into the quantitative stuff. But I think what you're talking about might have been a level below that. So every 2 years they say these are the strategies, and then at the agency level, which isn't necessarily reported to the legislature directly, are those action plans. And that may have been what you responded to in terms of a contract. Generally, contracts aren't part of this. It's a little...
Yeah, so I want to make sure we differentiate between the state of Texas procurement process and all the rules around that versus what Ryan does. But what I can tell you is that 5th goal that he wouldn't talk about is probably to get Stephen Phillips to stop speeding on Texas highways. That's that 5th secret goal,
yes.
Right? Thank you.
So I think when you're talking about procurement, that's going to be a level of detail below what we're talking about here. So
I know dates behind contract deliverables and things like that. They usually ask you to provide that.
Yeah, the contract level aren't generally going to be in the strategic plan. That gets approved by the governor's office and the legislative budget board. There are subcontracts that go below that are at the operational level. And if you're interested in talking about that a little bit more, that's not really what I had planned on talking about, but how the procurement system works. All right. So basically, like I said, DPS has 5 big goals. One big mission is protect and serve, which sounds very law enforcement. So it's any law enforcement agency across the U.S. is probably going to talk about that they protect and serve. But when I talked about that, there's no really quantitative piece to that. So when you say how much did we protect and serve this year versus next year, that's not the level of detail we get into. When we start getting into the goals, again, combat crime and terrorism. So we've got folks like the Texas Rangers, Criminal Investigations Division, Intelligence and Counterterrorism, Enhanced Public Safety. Mostly that's highway patrol. So the folks in those patrol cars you see on the highways, they're fitting that particular goal of how we do protect and serve.
I'm very familiar with those. Thanks, Ryan.
Appreciate it. That was a secret goal until now. TDEM, I don't know how many are familiar with the Department of Emergency Management, but when hurricanes hit, or wildfires, or the Bastrop fires, or the fertilizer plant, TDEM's the folks that help organize counties, local authorities, and they also work with FEMA. But that's our 3rd big goal in terms of what DPS does. And our little yellow arrow is where I kind of fit, is enhanced regulatory and licensing services. And that includes driver license, concealed handgun licensing, the sticker you get on your car when you get inspected. All that stuff fits in here too. And then all the support services, so that's like HR, IT, all that fits in part of our stuff. Any more specific now, and kind of my neck of the woods is driver license. So that's where our money comes in, and that's all that gets into our big one metric that matters. We've got 6 of them. By the way, this is our bottom line. So we don't create a profit. Our job is to reduce wait times. Our job is to make sure your driving records get to you in a timely manner. And what else? Oh yeah, make sure your license is accurate, so you don't have to mail it back anytime. So this is what the legislature says, guys, this is what you do. You're not going to provide us with profit. Your job is to do these things. And so that's what drives all our decision making. And as it turns out, in about 5 years ago, we had what was called the Sunset Commission. I think we talked about that. Sunset Commission comes around about every 10 years and looks at state agencies and says, are you filling any mission? The Horse and Buggy Commission went away a few years ago. DPS mission said, this is what you guys need to focus on. It's the wait time. They said, basically, you guys need to revamp pretty much everything you're doing. And so all our activity in the last 5 years is geared around reducing wait times. So we kind of knew what needed to get fixed, we just didn't really know how. So we turned to Texas State University, and what they did is help us use some of the data that's collected in our driver license system to help identify where are the places that need the most help. It turned out it was mostly the urban areas. And so we looked at where people lived. So when you get your driver license, yes, sir?
What department in Texas State?
Geography.
What department at Texas State?
Geography. They have what's called the Government Partnership Program, and so they kind of, even though it's housed within the Geography Department, they can reach out to any part of the university for help. And it turned out that GIS was kind of the thing we needed to identify where population was, where a lot of our customers lived, and where the greatest need was. So at about the same time, we had a legislator ask, what's it going to take to fix driver license? And we said, well, we think it's going to take 6 big offices. And so we turned to Texas State to do a big GIS study to help determine where to put those. They said Dallas, Fort Worth area, Garland specifically, Fort Worth, Pflugerville. I don't know if y'all have been in that office recently. San Antonio, and then around Houston, Spring, and Rosenberg. And what we realized is how little we knew about how to use data. So we turned to an outside agency. We've been collecting information for decades. We're about to hit our 80th anniversary. And so as Steve was so kind to point out, we do have a lot of antiquated systems. Some stuff's all running on COBOL. I think for some reason we just hired a mainframe developer because they needed to maintain some of these systems. So, it's kind of like hiring someone to speak Latin for us, but that's kind of where we are now. But also, not just our systems were kind of out of date, so were some of our processes and our ability to use data to make good decisions. So as I talked about earlier, there's kind of that political, this is how we've always done it, the process, and then how we use data. And so we're using that as kind of a new technique to help drive decision making. As it turned out, it went pretty good. So about 2011 is when we broke ground on these mega centers around the state. And the stuff in green is kind of our weights. On the left-hand side in green, over 50% of the people that visit these offices wait less than 5 minutes. It actually kind of freaked people out because they would get in line and immediately be called, and they weren't used to that. So they would get their ticket and get called to the counter, and they'd sit and wait, and they weren't really know what to do, so they had to get called again. But it's kind of a nice problem to have sometimes, but it started reducing how happy people were. It actually had an adverse effect on customer satisfaction. But what we realized, doing 6 of those wasn't quite enough. So the stuff in gray is the areas that exist now that do have queuing systems, which for us is actually a relatively new technology, where you get a ticketing system that's something that's tracked through a database of some kind. It's actually about a 3-year-old technology for us, as is accepting credit cards. So I'll point back to Steve. Yes, we have some antiquated systems and processes and mindsets, some culture stuff. How many of you have worked in a call center or any kind of system that involves queuing, network engineering, any kind of thing like that? Erlang C? Okay. So we hired a guy who used to work with NASA, helped design some of the systems on the space shuttle. Bob knows some of the guys that we work with, to kind of look at queuing, one as a network thing and just how people wait in line. And I completely lost what I was going to say. Crap.
Hey, so I'll ask you a question to jog your memory. Oh, we had a question? Well, I've got a good question. So you guys looked at it from how to serve better,
Yes.
right? How to people who need to renew their driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be a little bit of a controversial question I'll ask you. Don't you really in the system already know when people's driver's license have expired?
Yes. So that data has been there.
Right. So that's kind of where I'm kind of going with this is, if you think about the access to data that DPS has, if they wanted to, I'm just saying, and this is why I'm asking this question and making this point out to spark some conversation. They could dispatch a bunch of DPS to sit right by an address and wait for that person to come out and get in a car, pull them over and say, your license is expired. Well, how'd you know that? just happen to be passing by, right? But so what's in place that prevents that sort of thing?
Bigger crimes. Yeah. I mean, so the same thing. We've got county. We have 254 counties in the state of Texas. We have less than 254 driver license offices. And once in a while, my assistant director will get a call from one of these county judges who wants to know why we don't have an office in his county seat. And now my assistant director can turn to me within about an hour. I'll tell him exactly why we don't have an office somewhere. So of course, that's not in a table somewhere why we don't have something, but using some of the data where the population lives, kind of the population density within the zip code, we can start telling them, well, 80% of your residents live in this particular zip code, which is 5 miles away from a driver license office in another county. And so we're able to turn some of that political stuff that normally would have been kind of a big deal into kind of a data-driven, sorry, we can't support you. But as far as what some of the people were saying is we should just go door to door and provide those services to people as they needed. So Harris County with 4.4 million people and Loving County with 87 residents. There's more cows than people. People were like, why don't we have a driver license office there? So one of the problems we're having is that one size doesn't fit all. So although it makes sense to put big centers in these urban areas, we're having trouble trying to figure out how to serve rural citizens. And so that's one of the missions we're on this biennium. But the problem we were having wasn't so much with the math as far as queuing went. So that Erlang C stuff, so we could start modeling what would happen if we changed how many counters we had open at a given time in a given office. And we started doing that in one particular office in Cedar Hill, Texas. We pulled someone off of drive tests, 16-year-olds getting their license for the first time, taking a test, and put them on the counter for just an hour in the morning. And it had a tremendous, huge effect. We could model in advance, then test it out in the office. We could take an hour and a half wait time. And by just making one change with one person for 1 hour every day, went to about a 15-minute wait. And we tested that, did it in the field, and then we started teaching kind of queuing theory to our office managers. And while we hadn't rolled this out to all our offices, we wanted to teach people kind of how to manage queues, how to shift priorities from original transactions to renewals or whatever. And people said that's not possible. We can't have that. That's not true. And so our biggest problem with data was, in big data, well, this wasn't quite big yet, but with data in general, was just getting people to not trust their intuition. That was the biggest challenge. I've never seen it work that way. We had that happen again in South Austin. Last summer, we had an office get broke into. A lot of damage happened, and we weren't really sure, should we rush to try to get it back into operation, because summer is our busiest time. You have students out of school who want to get ready to drive when they get back to school. More people are born in the summer, and that's when your license renewal comes up. So we had to make a decision about, should we reopen this office or can we wait? And we did that same treatment we talked about in Cedar Hill to this office in South Austin, and we couldn't convince the people on the counter that they had actually processed more people. But it wasn't until we were able to show them the numbers on how this worked that they were convinced that they were more productive and the wait times were lower. Big point of this slide is we made some improvements, but there's still stuff that needs to get done. Yes, sir?
Can you say again what it was that you changed?
Sure. Traditionally, we had a flat scheduling. So basically, we might have 10 counters that can process folks and maybe 11 people that work there. And because they had a certain number of people that demand for tests, we started the ability to schedule tests in advance online. And so we blocked off 1 hour in the morning that they couldn't schedule tests. And the person that would normally do the drive tests at that time simply was on the counter. And what we found is that reduced the backlog of people trying to get service, which reduced the wait time up front. And for the rest of the day, the wait time is relatively low. So that simple change was really counterintuitive to a lot of the experience people had for years working in the offices. They said that couldn't possibly have an effect. And so it wasn't until we actually showed them over and over that it does have an effect. So really it was a cultural change, or just kind of a mindset of how this could work. Because a lot of them said, oh, this is a spreadsheet voodoo or something. This couldn't really happen. And it wasn't until they actually saw it that it would, trying to transfer that knowledge to other places. But that's kind of the technique. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
You said you had, I think, 5 or 6 more hotspots in the grid. Is that indicated by a region? Is it indicated by sites or locations that you want to build new sites, or is it integrated all together?
Yeah, explain like green versus gray.
Sure.
What's is the green the new mega centers?
They are.
And what's the gray?
The gray are offices that are established that had queuing systems before we opened up the mega centers. And then once we opened the mega centers, we had a tremendous effect on the folks that visited. As it turns out, that's about 10% of our entire volume goes to those 6 offices. So it had a big effect on 50% of 10% of the population. But the gray is kind of the areas that weren't, that are not mega centers. So for example, North Lamar, the one on Denson and Lamar, is one of those offices that still needed some help. But this is still relatively old. This is about 2012 data. So we have been able to look at some of our processes, the things I've described already, have had that effect in some of our offices. So we have a new team that just looks at business process within the office, because we found there are some unique weirdnesses about some of the offices. Some may be located closer to a factory, and so what works in one office doesn't necessarily work in another. Their rush may happen right after lunch when the factory shift lets out. We also found that rain has a big effect on areas that have a lot of construction. So if it's raining, construction workers aren't working, they go and take care of their errands. So some of those peculiarities we're still trying to sort out. Yes, sir?
If there was a break-in or destroyed building, maybe think about security system uniform across the board. Is it more vulnerable in rural areas? How are you addressing that in the mega centers?
Security system.
Data protection.
Data protection, we have a secure network that we transmit our data across. I don't really have much more detail on that.
In the rural section, homeowners will have mega centers. Connect the same system, so if there's a break-in, my information is more vulnerable out there than it is in the city.
Yeah, I mean, it's if someone breaks in, they're like, if no one's there, there's no way they can access it. It's not stored locally, so it's kind of a web-based system, but without getting into the details of how the system works. Yes, sir?
Yes, Stephen Phillips. Good to see you, Ryan. Hey, so you mentioned just a second ago about weather impacting and construction zones. How do you guys overlay weather data into the stuff you analyze?
Right now, we're still working on the model for that. So we're still kind of at a big global, big chunky, where do we build stuff level of detail. As we move forward, we're going to look at some of those renewals, where are they likely to go. So probably it's 1 or 2 iterations out from where we are now. But we can still collect it. There's plenty of good weather data out there that we don't have to store locally that we can use for analysis. I know that there's different parts of DPS that do use weather data, lunar cycles, all types of stuff to look at things. But for now, we're not at that level of detail yet.
So what's the #1 birthday and license renewal day of the year?
License renewal is September 9th. For some reason, it just happened to be it. I had a fight with one of the statistics department heads. He said our demand was flat, and so I said, I don't think so. Took a look at when renewals happen, and there's a big cycle that happens June, July, August, and then into September. But the reason why the renewal date gets weird is we also have what's called temporary visitors. So folks that visit from out of the country that are here on a visa, their license expiration date is not set on their birthday, it's set on their visa expiration. And as it turns out, for some reason, the State Department is very fond of September 9th. Yeah. So we found a huge spike in renewals for folks who have visas. And as I was doing that analysis, it was one of those serendipity kind of things that we found, holy crap, it's going to get really busy in urban areas, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, where there's big schools, medical centers, all types of high-tech jobs. So those offices in those areas saw a big surge in demand. And as a result, we didn't have a good way to mitigate that. And but we were able to predict, get a communication plan out. Hey guys, it's going to be busy, it's going to be long, we're sorry, but just anticipate that. So once we start doing, once we started using data, we started looking at ethics was kind of the big question. And when it comes to government, the big question is government relevant? Is it solving problems that aren't kind of self-licking ice cream cones? Some people would argue that solving wait times is a self-induced problem that we're trying to solve. And in some cases that is, but really what we're trying to figure out is what problems do we need to solve? One of the things that the driver license division provides is a driver license. How many of you have a driver license by a show of hands? How many of you used it in the last 6 months? How many of you used it in the last 6 months for your driving record? None? One had a ticket or something?
No, I did get a boat ticket,
Okay.
operate a boat and use a driver's license and insurance.
Right, so it has absolutely nothing to do with your driving record. So the value is you can get on a plane, you can open a bank account, you can, well, for me, I just signed a mortgage, so there's a lot of paperwork with that. But I've been talking to other state agencies, other federal agencies about what problems are we trying to solve. And some of them right now, like the IRS, are self-induced problems, the amount of paperwork it takes to just figure out how much you owe in taxes. But the big question becomes, are we able to solve problems in the real world? And so, once we get past solving wait times, what are some of the other things we can do? Enabling people to use just one version of identification for, say, your fishing license and your hunting license and your other means of identification. So solving some of those other problems is one of the ways that we think we can start using data, is to help identify those problems out in the world, and then align our resources, your tax dollars, to start solving those problems. What we found is that people really were appreciative of reducing wait times. We figure last year we saved about 3 to 6 million hours of waiting in line. In terms of FTEs, full-time equivalents for employers, how much is 3 million hours worth of labor back into the force worth? And so our bottom line, again, is reducing wait times, but what bottom line does that fix out in the real world? Unfortunately, there's not a lot of faith in government's ability to solve problems. And so we're working, some of the things we're doing is to improve that reputation. You look at the Pew Center, trust in government has gone down significantly since they started collecting this information back in the 1960s. So what impact does that have on our society, not having that trust? I'm not sure yet. Again, federal government, not a lot of faith in our ability to solve problems, partially because there's a lot of internal focus on a lot of agencies. We need to get efficient. It's us versus them. Case studies with the IRS kind of bear that out, and that's kind of what I'm hearing in other agencies.
Hey, Ryan, if I could just piggyback on that statement. We showed some results of a survey, I think, probably 6 months ago, and it showed, I think, 55% of the public is comfortable sharing their information with a private company with the fact that they know in exchange they're going to get some type of benefit, coupon, rewards card, free thing, right? But only 40% of the population is comfortable giving that same data to the government. Which I think, if you think about it, it mirrors all the things you just showed there. I mean, at the end of the day, if I can get a $5 gift card at Target, they can have my social, my kids' names, my mother's name, my last 8 addresses. Just give me that damn $5 gift card, right? Oh, but the government, you're going to try. What are you doing over there? I'm not giving you all this. So it's interesting when you think about how what I just said mirrors up to what you just showed. So that was just a comment.
And so why it's relevant for big data is a lot of this is self-inflicted. Think of the NSA. There's some things that are getting caught. The IRS, the things that they've been doing lately that just don't seem to be solving our problems. What else? NSA's been the big one. But when we start talking about things like the recent scandal with Facebook, doing tests on people and their emotions. Is anyone familiar with that? They did some tests on showing pictures, and they wanted to show what kind of mood that showed. It turns out there was really only 0.01% change in people's behavior after seeing something, some of the mood changing pictures on Facebook, which seems really insignificant, but to the data scientists, they were like, woohoo, because when they have 1 million people looking at the same thing and they change the behavior of roughly 10,000 people, that's kind of a big deal. Or was it 1,000? But how are we doing? So when we start talking about what we're doing in the state of Texas, I think when we start talking about ethical uses of data, ethical uses of our tax dollars, what kind of things we're expecting people to do, Texas is actually doing pretty darn good. We're not quite in the top 5, but we're in the top 10. But what I want you to notice in terms of how people trust how Texas is doing is compare the relative populations of the states that it's sharing space with. North Dakota, you could probably combine all those states into Texas. In the last 10 years, we've gone from about 20 million residents to 25 million. And that was one of the problems that we had with wait time, is we didn't have any new resources, no new offices, no new hires to handle the influx of roughly 5 million more people. We're still looking at population growth. The things the governor's currently doing to try to draw businesses in is actually pretty effective. But the great thing is people kind of trust how things are working in Texas. And people are moving away from places that don't. We have a lot of people moving from Illinois. We have a lot of people moving in from California to Texas.
So what would be interesting is to map that to the, I'm not trying to say political affiliation, but the financial situation of the state. Some states have bigger state governments than others. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that would be an interesting, Texas is known as being a very lean state government, right? I mean, the legislative branch only meets every 2 years. The rest of the time, they're off doing great stuff, right? Farmers, ranchers, lawyers, whatever. So that would be it. I'm not saying you need to do that, but there might be a correlation between the size of the state government from a budget standpoint as compared to the trust level of that government.
Yeah, some of the stuff on here, I pulled this from Gallup site. I was liberal with leaving the label on there. But a lot of them are Republican states, or where people trust government. And I don't know what's causation and correlation here, but there was a lot of correlation between the two. If it's caused because they're Republicans, or people in Republican states tend to have governments that they can trust. So I'm not ready to go into that yet. But what I can say is the work that we've been doing in terms of just reducing wait times. Hold on, I'll get into that. Man, I got this slide way out of order. Come back to it then. So one of the things we did is we enlisted the University of Texas. They help us with a couple surveys that are mandated by the legislature. But they do our employee engagement, and they do customer satisfaction surveys for us. And one of the things we asked them to do was look specifically at what the effect was on customer satisfaction with these new mega centers. What we found is that they asked the question, I trust the driver license division to do a good job. And so it comes again, we're kind of correlating that now with kind of, are we doing the right things? And I think we're kind of doing them the right way. But overall, we're increasing, we saw that 77% of folks trust Texas government in general. We found it's a little bit higher with the effect of the mega centers. This is isolated, so I'm not saying this is a great scientific study that proves definitively that we've improved trust in state government, but I think we're moving things in the right direction. We've got a lot of work yet to do, but I think the work is going to pay off in the long run, not just in reduced wait times, but the effectiveness of government overall. Yes, sir?
In that area comes security and privacy. If you can protect the data on a single line system and stay uniform across the board, is there any data standard protocol for who can share the uniform? And I asked you, you've collected this data, you have it stored, it's secure. Is there any restriction on who can access it? And is there any identification markers of who accesses now?
I think the question was, once we've collected this data, are there any protocols in place, any rules that prevent me just from giving it out to anyone? Absolutely. All the way, it's in it's in government code that says what information can be released to whom. So, for example, driving records. School districts who hire bus drivers can have access to that bus driver's driving record to make sure that they're a safe driver. Law enforcement can have access to different sets of information. So there's different grades of information that are codified in statute that say, yes, this is what can and what cannot be released. Even just looking at a record that you shouldn't have access to. What I mean by that, if you're not conducting a transaction that's related to a driver license record or driver license application, for example, you want to look up Matthew McConaughey, there's alerts then. So I mean, it is monitored. It is something we take very seriously. Not just that physical level of security who can access it, but the people that do have access to it, it's monitored routinely. Does that answer your question? So I mean, there are legitimate uses for some of this information. For example, I'm trying to think who it is, like LexisNexis. Some of these data aggregators have a certain level of access to information, but very finite, personally identifying information like social security numbers, generally not.
Ever been subpoenaed by the NSA and people like that? Or?
I have no idea. I'm sure I'm not going to subpoena that stuff, but I mean, the system does work. I mean, because a trooper needs to know if you have a warrant, so it's going to be linked to your driver license number when they pull you over. So that's through what's called NLEX, National Law Enforcement Telecommunications System. And there's memorandums of understanding, agreements, various contracts that enable law enforcement to talk to one another. At another, not quite so high level of security, is just a problem driver pointer system. So if you were in Colorado and you were suspended and you moved to Texas and you want to get a driver license, we share that information through a compact between the states. And then there is some reciprocity with other countries. For example, Germany, France, England. We're able to share some of that information if someone applies for a license in the United States, specifically in Texas. So I think, does that kind of cover your questions about security in terms of just kind of the protocols and doctrinal and procedural kind of things?
Kind of. Still worried about sharing, but yes.
Okay. Well, at that point, it becomes what elected officials think is appropriate. We just make sure that it gets executed in accordance with laws and statutes.
We're facing the same thing where I am. If you try to do the personal data at the very end, once you crawl, walk, run, they actually give your dash, but because you've got other things to solve. You've also got the security. Even if you resolve all the other protocols above the data, there's still protocols of the data coming in.
Yeah, I don't work in the IT.
Lines and rest, but so these kinds of issues, it's nice that people are beginning to think about it rather than how it is. But there's a lot of good things to do with big data and analytics. There is a class I was talking to her about after you do this kind of weighting processing kinds of things, where you can actually perhaps evaluate your own employees. The employees do give up some form of they do allow the company to have a certain kind of data, certain data related to the work. So the next thing they may do is find out why people why they aren't, maybe they got a lot of sick days. I mean, I'm trying to pull something out of the air. So we're going to work our way. I think all of us are going to work our way up. The one area that got there before us, it seems, is this thing called HIPAA in healthcare. And there are agencies working hard on resolving that. It would probably make a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, but as far as, yes, sir.
Well, part of this information is public information right off the bat. Like if you get arrested, that's public information, but I think it stops there down at social security number and things like that.
Yeah.
And there are some programs. What's the name of that program that the police departments are working on to share data amongst them? Because that's kind of one of the problems. Is that some law enforcement agencies have all this information, about a particular individual and he goes somewhere else and starts committing crimes, he or she, they don't know what was going on over here, so I can't think of the name of the program.
I'm not sure there's a couple as
You
far as
guys
sharing,
are
like,
involved with
there's
ATD.
tons of, I mean, there's different programs that law enforcement's involved in that I'm,
But there's a certain, what I want to make is there's a certain group of information that's public.
yeah.
But it's usually, there's a booking, if someone, if you base my credit card score, I mean, yes, credit scores are something where they're looking at our data very closely. But I think there are ways to, I can test it all that stuff, and I would figure that in this application you just talked about. And I think we'll have to go through that. Well,
I just hope there was a list of
There's some
all the
civil-
levels of.
some civil and carrying is gonna-
And I'm not sure exactly what statute it is in government code that lists those levels, but it's in there, some subchapter on page, 1,000, whatever. But overall,
Hey Ryan, so here's a question. When was the last time that there was a major breach at the DPS that millions of driver's license, date of birth, addresses were released?
I'm not aware of any. I've been here
Okay.
for 5 years.
When was the last time credit card numbers were breached at a retailer?
Was it Christmas?
Target, Christmas, right? Yesterday, I got a call from my bank who said we're sending you a new card because we got notification you might be. So I'm not trying to paint a picture that what DPS is doing is perfect. But what I'm trying to just put that in context. A CEO of Target lost his job because of that breach that occurred, right? This entity has access to more information that they could use they have things in place to stop that. So then my next transition is, how many people have taken surveys, right? And somebody said, hey, how was this service? How many people have not really cared about the survey and just answered it to get them off the phone, right? You want to know why people care about big data and analyzing unstructured data sets? It's because the consumer can fake that survey result, but the consumer can't. When you start calculating all the people's Facebook tweets, product reviews, their behavior in all those data sets tells the truth. You can fake that. You can fake a survey. I told 7-Eleven 5 years ago I thought their food was the freshest ever, and it sucks if you've ever had their food, right? So what I'm trying to just paint another picture of is the fact that the truth is in the data if you look at enough data sets. And I'm not saying your survey is not worthwhile, Ryan. I think it's good. I'm just trying to paint a picture. I just want to throw those two things out there. And I'll stop talking.
Real quick, you bring up an interesting point, because you're talking about different kinds of data, right? And not just the type of data, but you're talking about an identification type of data. Again, so you're talking about driver's license information as a physical identifier. If you're talking about a name, a number, an address. And the data that you're talking about, especially in an instance like Target, is your preferences. It's your behaviors. How do you behave? How do you respond? What are your buying behaviors, your patterns, your analyses? When you come into the store, do you come in on a Monday, on a Tuesday? Are you buying? I think one of the questions, if I can kind of loop this back around to the ethics side of it, is the data that you can gather from DPS, you can go buy anyway. You can go find through a data program. I can go buy your driver's license.
You just get information requested. A lot of times just open the newspaper, you can see everybody's arrested.
Yeah, that's easy to get. The information that's becoming, that's raising ethical challenges, Target's a great example. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Target case of the young lady who was pregnant, and her dad found out about it because she started getting maternity coupons. That's the area of big data that starts getting a little sketchy, because now we can see behaviors, we can predict behaviors, and we can look and say, I can track a consumer based on their buying behavior, not by their social, not by anything else, but by what they've done, what day of the week. I can get past the demographic data
into the inference level or an insight level, where I can come back and say, I can say that Anthony's going to go out on Tuesday, buy a bottle of wine and a steak, and he'll be back to the hardware store on Thursday to buy another bag of charcoal.
Are you tracking me? 'Cause that's
And,
about what I
and,
did.
and issue them a coupon for their Tuesday.
And issue a
Which you're going
coupon
to scare.
and have a coupon shop
Ready for, yes.
Those are some of the areas that are coming
But
around.
what's interesting about that is surveys have shown consumers will opt in for that.
If there's an exchange of value.
Right, if I get something back from you, then I will do it. But I'm not giving any more information to DPS, IRS, anybody else than what I have to. And I really don't like to know what they're doing.
Or you're suggesting they give coupons.
That's it, that's it. I get one
Steve,
free
thanks.
speeding ticket. One, free.
That may be something we bring up at the Public Safety Commission.
Occasionally, they have amnesty periods for outstanding parking tickets.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Speeding tickets, you come
I
in
think-
and reduce
Well, some of the behavior we're trying to influence right now is, so we open up a new mega center and we have more in the works, because we know that we don't have enough capacity quite yet. But one of the behaviors we weren't expecting is that we open up a new mega center with tons of capacity, but everyone wants to go to the one they went to last time. And that's just where they're familiar. There's not enough capacity, and so the wait time's higher, even though 10 miles north of where they are now is an office that they would have a wait time of about 5 to 10 minutes. Otherwise, now they're just,
Are you publishing those wait times?
we're not yet, but when we, right, and so we're looking at methods by which we do that. And I think actually we have a pretty clever guy who's, for us, clever. Well, he's clever in general, but for us, he's really darn clever. But just hooking at drive times and wait times. So when someone looks at where's the closest, what's a good office for me to visit, they'll put in their zip code, and we'll combine the wait time with the drive time and say this is an ideal office for you to visit. What we're also doing is sending out renewal notices far early in advance for people to know, hey, did you know that 90% of the people in your area go to this office? So some of those behavioral economics, some of those kind of things we're working towards, not quite there yet, but influencing behavior that's benevolent. And if you're familiar with a guy named Cass Sussestein, he's a guy at Harvard, and he just wrote a book called Simpler. And really, it's just saying government can be a lot simpler and therefore more effective. And one of the ways you do that is just those small nudges to move people towards what he calls paternalist libertarianism. So we're not reducing your choices, we're just kind of nudging you towards the one that works out more for your benefit. Yes, sir?
Brian, if you're saying that you would increase or reduce the wait times by having one person more assigned to a desk and blocking off a time when they could be scheduled another service in that area. On another stage, could you schedule a known center, preferred center to be closed on period and suggest that during that closed period they use the mega center to get them used to it?
We're not going to close an office because we still need the capacity. But the things that we do schedule, like drive tests, written tests, things that can be scheduled in advance, we're starting to get a little more clever with how we do scheduling. So, maybe we schedule fewer things on Monday when there's more people who decide they're going to take off Monday at lunch to go take care of stuff, and therefore, looking at the trends, more walk-ins happen on Mondays and Fridays, so we can reduce the number of things we schedule on Mondays and Fridays and move people towards Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Or make more opportunity for those same days in another place.
Right. So, we're learning about how we kind of cross-load that kind of stuff as we kind of go from descriptive analysis into diagnostic, and now we're getting more into predictive and prescriptive analysis. So as we're maturing, because our analytics team is me, one other guy, and a half-time contractor. So it's not that we're out of good ideas, it's just we still don't have time to implement them.
So what's interesting what you just said right there is, if the driver's license organization said, here, this is what you want. We know this is what you want. This is when you're going to go here. This is when you're going to do this, and here are the options you're going to check. Most people would say, government's not telling me to do anything, right? Oh, but when Amazon tells me that, oh, I'm going to buy that. I'm going to buy this thing. Because Amazon said, we're going to nudge you in the area where we know you're probably going to want to buy. But when government does it, people are like, well, I don't want to go to the office on Tuesday. Even though you're probably going to go to the office on Tuesday, and they suggest you go to the office on Tuesday, just because the government suggested to go to the office on Tuesday, you're not going to go to the office on Tuesday, right? So this is why this is a very interesting conversation about how we view public entities and state entities and federal entities on how they use analytics versus how a private company does. So the one thing, I know you got a question, I do want to give so it's 8 o'clock.
I disagree.
You disagree?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If I'm an Occupy Wall Street person, I don't trust Amazon either. If you have an open society, which you started to say you've got that in your plan at least, then people will go ahead and, because they made the decision. They looked at that if they had the time, or probably make it convenient for them to say, you'll get your driver's license renewed 2 hours earlier. That's value. If you want to build trust, make your system open and show value.
Yeah, so that's a couple phases down the road. We'd like to, because one of the things, you know, I'm looking at, paying attention to kind of open government, civic hacking, all those kinds of things that make, you know, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. You know, I don't think government's going to be able to do it all by itself. But one of the things we're looking at is what information would be useful to, say, real estate folks if they knew the number of original applications in a particular zip code in a particular time period. If they knew we had this many new people moving from out of state, so maybe originals by people over the age of 30. Would that be personally identifying? Would that put anybody out? Or would that be useful information?
It might be if it's personally identifiable. So you better have yourself a mechanism where people, not bureaucrats or listed agents, because that's Amazon. Listed agents, they're as tricky as Amazon.
So if I say we had 35 people from out of state,
No, I'm not talking, you better scrub that. That's all.
Oh yeah, so that's what
Your
we're looking at.
policy commission doesn't sound like you listen to the legislators that much, but outside
Okay.
perhaps giving you set points.
Well, the legislators are saying we need open government, so.
Yeah, and I was in a meeting next door where another group is trying to help make that happen, and they are very much interested in civil liberties.
Yeah, so people associate that there's a trade-off. So we gave me the 1 hour marker, or?
Yes, I'm not trying to kill the party, right? It's a little warm in here. Got a little warm? Yeah. Hey, Brittany, can somebody turn the air down just a bit? All right, but also it's at the top of the hour, and what we typically try to do is start to wrap up. I want to let Ryan kind of finish with some closing thoughts, then we'll take, you know, I'll kind of say a few words, and then we'll mix and mingle. You can go talk to Ryan, you can talk to one of me, you can talk to one of yous. That makes sense? So Ryan, yeah, top of the hour, so let's start to wrap up. Just be sensitive to everybody's time.
Okay. As it turns out, we're pretty much at the end. I did want to cover one more slide. So recently in Corpus Christi, we got some pretty bad press. Apparently we surprised a bunch of people because we're opening up a new office there, and that upset people. But as it turns out, we were able to provide the news outlet that kind of said we're making these arbitrary decisions, and I was more than happy to provide them the analysis I'd done back in 2012 about this site selection in Corpus. We're moving 10 miles north of where the current location is, and the information got passed to the mayor of Corpus, who said, no, we've kind of known about this. It's a pretty sound analysis, and it's kind of nice to, I don't know if there's some popular trend, it's popular to slam government, say they're just arbitrary and kind of sneaky. It was nice to kind of have the news media recant what they had said earlier, which was kind of nice. But what are we looking at next? So we're using something of a little bit of a lean startup, not so much the entrepreneurship, but the entrepreneurship, if you're familiar with Eric Rice's lean startup method. We use a little bit of lean analytics. We're starting small, wait times, because that's the one metric that matters in the driver license division. As we kind of get our processes, data sets set, we'll nail it, scale it to other divisions. We've already got other state agencies kind of, how are you guys doing this? So hopefully we'll be able to do some of the same things in other state agencies and across other ones that are already in talks. That's kind of what I've got.
All right, cool. Everybody give Ryan a big round of applause. Thank you, Ryan. Good job, sir. All right, so pretty good stuff, pretty insightful information. What'd y'all think? You can all lie to me and just shake your head and say that was the most incredible thing you've ever seen. That'll make me feel good. I'll go home and sleep good tonight.
Ooh.
All right. Thank you. I like that. I like that. No, I think it's always good to get different perspectives. We've had people come up here from private companies. We've had people come up here from state entities, and I think it's just always really interesting to see different aspects of what they're doing and some of the governance that's in place, what drives their decision-making processes, what are their objectives, and what the means in which they're trying to achieve those objectives. So with that, I've got 700 more slides I want to go through in the next 20 minutes. I'm going to need credit card. No, I'm just kidding. So I do want to say August 20th. August 20th, we will be back here. I will post it on the meetup group, the Data Curiosity, All Things Data. I'll post it tomorrow. It will be about startups thriving in the data economy. We will have our Vice President from Dell, Matt Walken. Just because I said Vice President from Dell, don't roll your eyes. He's actually a really good speaker and has some pretty good insights, and is just generally a good guy, and will talk to you till you're blue in the face. He's a machine. He doesn't go to sleep at night. He plugs in with a little USB drive in the back of his head, and he sends emails all night long. But he's a really good guy. He's going to be here. We're going to record it because we're going to put it as part of the Center for Entrepreneurs online video series that they're doing for a learning series for entrepreneurs. So I invite you to be here. Should be a good time. Anybody have any questions? Anybody have any answers? All right, so if there's any more food, grab some more food, talk to people, shake hands, and thank you so much for coming out. This wouldn't be possible without you. So thank you so much for your interest, and give yourself a round of applause.